opening prayer.
All right.
We can already begin.
Begin with the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, Lord.
But Mary stayed outside the tomb weeping. And as she wept, she bent over into the tomb and saw two angels in white sitting there, one at the head and one at the feet, where the body of Jesus had been. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken my Lord, and I do not know where they laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus there, but did not know it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" She thought it was the gardener and said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Stop holding on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and tell them, I am going to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdala went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and what he told her. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Opening prayer. Lord Jesus, help us to accept your invitation to live a more mature faith in the face of desolation or disappointment.
We see well into the heart of Mary Magdalene, filled with grief-stricken sorrow at the loss of her beloved Jesus. Bent over an empty tomb, she is disconsolate and disoriented. Jesus knows how to give comfort to her aching heart. He turns her heartache into joy and her misery into delight by merely recognizing and acknowledging her, by calling her name. As the great gardener of our souls, Jesus and teacher and Lord, he also knows how to cultivate lasting fruit in our lives. It's important, a matter of spiritual life or death, that we spend time each day sitting with Jesus, acknowledging he is present and waiting for him to call our name and to reassure us that he is at work in our soul.
Stop holding on to me. Jesus asked Mary the same question he first posed to his early followers. What do you want? Whom are you looking for? It reveals Jesus' utmost concern for the state of our hearts. Jesus cares about where we seek comfort, security, and assurance. If not in him, self-centeredness will frustrate and limit our desires. Stop holding on to me. These seemingly harsh words encourage Mary to lift her heart to the Father and ponder eternity, to elevate where and to whom she attaches her hopes and wants. His apparent reprimand is an exhortation for all of his disciples to set our hearts and minds on what is above, increasing our desire to follow him to the Father, who waits for us in heaven, in the glory of eternity. St. Paul understood Christ's words perfectly. If then you were raised with Christ, seek what is above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Think of what is above, not of what is on earth. Colossians 3:2. This invitation is for all of us.
Growth in faith is a personal and continuous journey from the darkness of no faith to partial faith and then finally to perfect faith. Mary's seeing is initially clouded by disappointment, grief, emotion, and the unspeakable sadness at the loss of being separated from the Lord. But the sound of Jesus' voice and the use of her name gives her clear vision. She recognizes him and is filled with joy and hope and joy. What does she do next? She becomes a model for every Christian as she obeys the Lord's instruction to go and tell the other apostles, I have seen the Lord. We are also called by his grace to share our real and personal encounters with the Lord.
Conversing with Christ. Lord, your Easter appearance bids us leave our tomb of self-absorption and hopelessness. Help us to look at the circumstances of our lives from the renewed perspective of the resurrection with Easter eyes. Let us not get stuck in the human limits of understanding, but rather deepen and broaden our capacity for hope and faith in divine possibilities. May our humble efforts to show how you touch our lives enable others in this broken and hurting world to rise from their tombs and live with hope and faith.
Together, my adorable Jesus,
may our feet journey together, may our hands gather in unity, may our hearts beat in unison, may our souls be in harmony, may our thoughts be as one, may our ears listen to the silence together, may our glances profoundly penetrate each other, may our lips pray together to gain mercy from the eternal Father. Amen.
Okay, the land acknowledgement.
Before we begin the Medicine Hat Catholic Board of Education, we'd like to acknowledge that we are gathering on the traditional land of the Blackfoot people who have welcomed here for centuries the Cree, the Métis, other First Nations, and non-Indigenous people. The land is now recognized as the traditional territory of Treaty 7 to the north, west, and south, and Treaty 4 to the east. The Medicine Hat Catholic Board of Education also wishes to thank the First Nations people, past and present, for welcoming us here.
Okay, we don't have any presentations. Approval of the minutes from last meeting, March 14th. Bernie,
I so move.
thank you. All in favor? Okay, approval of the agenda. Does anybody have any additions or? Okay, we'll go ahead and have that approved.
make the motion.
Okay, Robert, and all in favor? Okay, board communications. I'm gonna go with. Catholic education first, school parish relations. Robert?
Nothing to report.
Nothing to report. 8.2 Catholic Education Week, Heather?
So my report is attached. I'm happy to answer any questions.
If not, we'll go to the bishop's visit.
And the report is attached. That was just some information I wanted to share about the upcoming visit of Bishop McGrattan,
When is that, what date?
May 15th.
I currently have that held in your guys, like I sent out a invitation to hold that, so we can adjust as we can get a little bit more details or that sort of thing, but again, I'll write to about a 2-hour block or so.
Because it'll probably just be a lunch at the church, right? A lunch meeting?
Right, and there will be a part that the bishop will be meeting with the students, so
Right.
I'll let you know when that will be if any trustees want to come for that portion of it. But the lunch is the official portion.
Do we have we scheduled a meeting with the bishop as a board? Just for board discussion with the bishop?
That's what we
No,
were
I
kind
think
of,
this is kind of this is kind of that, but we were going to share our goals, our strategic goals for next year. But we
So
can
is there
talk
any
about
other opportunity for,
a more formal meeting.
yeah. Like we did I'm not sure what your time frame is. Is that something, well, is that something?
We
should
have
be
done
doing-
that in the past and we're supposed to do
We
that.
should be meeting him annually.
Yeah.
With the formal meeting.
So do we want to do that this year or do we want to do that in the fall?
I don't know, is there time for that, Heather, with his itinerary? Like,
I can inquire about that.
okay,
If he's here anyway, it might be worth having a formal meeting following lunch.
yeah, if there's time.
Yeah, good time. If not, maybe set up something for in the fall. Dick, go ahead.
Well, that was my question as well. I've been to several of these meetings with the bishop at lunch, and they're very informal, and there's really no opportunity to talk about board stuff.
Right.
And I think Robert's right, we should meet with him formally, at least once a year. Now, if there's no opportunity to do it in May, then we should work at setting a time some other time.
Yeah, in the fall. Probably. Yeah, that'd be great.
But just for, if I may, we should always be collaborating with the diocesan office to make sure, like if he's here for other things, if we could piggyback on stuff like that, it just makes sense. So is he
Right.
gonna be here for our faith day?
Yes.
So that might be an opportunity,
He's here for
As well.
confirmation too, but that's a Saturday.
yeah.
Yeah, faith day would be a good day to grab him.
But like, it is a full day of stuff too, right? So,
Plus, Faith Day is usually split with Lethbridge, so he doesn't get here till
okay, so maybe,
noon.
Yeah, that.
This year, we're different from Lethbridge.
Are we? Oh, okay.
But we do have the speaker in the morning, and the mass in the afternoon, so I'm not sure what the time frame would be like, but I'll, send Christina an email and just look at some options for a meeting.
It's sounding like adding this to another event for the bishop is difficult. That it might need to be a little different. And it may even mean that we have to go there.
We'll just give them some options and then just see what they say and then we can discuss it once we know what times he's available. Okay, 8.4 is Grace. Do you want to talk first?
Sure, so we have a meeting on April 17th at 7 p.m. at Holy Family, and that kind of invitation's been in all the school newsletters, it's been in the church bulletins, it's on the PowerPoint at Holy Family, inviting anyone who's interested in supporting Catholic education to come to that meeting. It's kind of our first step.
And everybody here is invited if you would like to come. Also with that, we were wondering if we could ask the board for some money. Just we've looked at different things that across the province they've done. Like one thing, for example, is they have given a bookmark to every student in the division in Lethbridge. They've done that. And different places have done little things. And so if we could kind of have, any like $3,000 or something like that, just as a fund, even to do a coffee thing or something at our meetings, or just want to see what the board thinks of that.
I think,
Go
I
ahead.
think, our, some of the revenue we're gaining from International Web, we could just, I'm sorry, my mind's drawing a blank, but we could, every year have so much money go towards Grace.
We did, when Grace first started way back, we did have a portion, and I'm not even sure what it was. I can't remember what it was. Do you
Yeah.
remember, Greg? we had a little bit of a slush fund kind of thing. I can't remember, it was like $2,000 or $3,000 or something. And it was just kind of what we're asking for now,
Yeah,
but we have to have that as a motion. So if somebody would, and it could come from that internet. Go ahead, Bernie.
Chair, I was just wondering, is this something strictly for students, a small token with a prayer or what is it with the students? Yeah. Okay. Is there money available currently in our religious ed budget that could cover that?
Not really, and we're trying, Grace is supposed to be outside of the school division. And so we're trying to get this going and hoping somebody will take it over. Does that make any sense? It's supposed to be a grassroots organization that isn't really driven by the school board, but all the school boards in Alberta have sort of done the initial push. And that's what we're doing. So we think we need a little bit of money to start doing that. Okay? Go ahead.
Was there an answer to Deacon Robert?
I think, yeah, maybe we can discuss that. I personally, I think that it's fitting that that fund that we have set aside for religious education, that would be a perfect, it would be appropriate to draw from that fund, I think, for this initiative.
From the international education
Yes.
part.
So through the chair to Mrs. Urban, is there money in there that could be used for this?
Yes, I feel much more comfortable if it would be out of that budget line versus everything's kind of spoken for in my other budget, but in that budget, there's definitely wiggle room there.
Go ahead.
There's about $40,000 left from that. Oh, okay.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move. And Mr. McPherson, you could help me here because I'm mindful of the conversation we had earlier in the year about, amending the budget and so on. So if you want to jump in and help me with the language, that's fine. But I'd like to move that the Board of Trustees approve the expenditure of a one-time expenditure of $3,000 from the international education allocation to the religious education budget for the purchase of materials for students to support Grace. That's awfully wordy.
You're the,
Sorry,
that's perfect.
I know you wanted to say, but you're the wordy guy.
You're the motion maker.
Yeah, that great. Yeah. Go ahead.
Is that enough, Madam Chair, to do what you have in mind? $3,000 doesn't go very far.
I don't know. What do you guys think? We don't really know. Well, we'd like to do something for Education Week, that every student gets some little something. And like a bookmark, like you can get it printed at Boylan's, wouldn't be that expensive. With the Grace logo on it and the core goals of Grace. Just to sort of get it out there, to get people realizing that there is this movement in Alberta to preserve Catholic education and to be an advocate of Catholic education, because that's what Grace is, graceful advocate of Catholic education. So we want that out there, but we don't want to spend a whole lot of money. But I don't know.
I'm opposed to spending, I appreciate what your comment, I'm opposed to spending a whole lot of board money on something that really isn't supposed to be board. But I do appreciate, Madam Chair, your argument to give it a little bit of impetus, a little bit of inertia. So that's why I made.
And that's what we as a board in Alberta, under the bishops, are asked to do. And then sort of form a grassroots organization, and they can kind of be on their own, so I do think 3,000 is enough. I do.
I just did a quick Google search for on Vistaprint. If we wanted to do local, it might be more, but I know we're not looking for 5,000, but there's either 5,000 and 5,000. It looks like it's like $2,100. So I think if there's a way to do like an exact amount, I'm sure you could do it with the budget. Looking on
With the
Vistaprint.
3,000.
Yeah, looking on Vistaprint at least.
There's an online kind of print.
Yeah, and they're very efficient. We've dealt with them before and things, and they're
Like, we don't want anything fancy, we just
No.
want some little token that they can take home and say, look at this.
We could give them
For
a parish
education.
too,
Yeah,
extras of the parish.
so I do think 3,000 is enough. Okay, what is our,
So we need to vote.
okay, so we have the motion,
We have a motion, we just need to.
okay, all in favor? All right, thank you very much. That was kind of awkward to be the chair and ask for money. Board work plan, 9.1, Mr. McPherson.
Thank you. So this is the second quarter 2022-23 financial update, which is part of the board work plan. Quarterly, the Board of Trustees receives this update. This report is as of February 28th of 2023. And there is a motion that will be asked for in my presentation. The proposed motion will be a result that the Board of Trustees for the Medicine Hat Catholic Board of Education approve the acceptance of the 2022 to 2023 second quarter financial update as presented. The report itself is in the attachment, and I will be focusing most of the presentation on page 5 and page 6, as well as page 7. Within the financial update, we will note that the revenue is now currently at just over $37 million, and that's outlined on pages 8 and 9. So that's an increase of $1.8 million from the spring budget, which represents a 5.2% increase. Expenditures are now at $36.9 million, which is up from the spring budget of $1.6 million, which represents a 4.7% increase over the budget. The surplus currently, based on the forecast, will be at $140,000, and compared to the spring budget where there was a deficit of $30,000, that's an increase of $169,000. So we're still pretty much on target. When we look at our actual expenditures, we are currently sitting at 54% of budget, which is fairly close to being on target. When you consider most of the expenses are spread out over 10 or 12 months, depending on which program it's coming through. 54% is where we would want to be. Within the expenditure side, the information on new grants or the funding that became known after the spring budget was approved account for $1.6 million of the increase in revenue. Some of the more salient increases are on the teacher salaries settlement, where there was an increase of $244,000. We had the change in enrollment, which we talked about within the first quarter as well, which was $561,000 increase. Curriculum implementation funding was $128,000. The fuel price contingency year-to-date number, and that's all we're forecasting is the year-to-date, is at $40,000. For our supports to Ukrainian students, we received $33,000. One of the grants that we've received is the Learning Loss Grant. That's almost $26,000. Mental Health in School Grant, that's $201,000. However, only about $79,000 is projected to be utilized within the 22-23 year. the remainder to be utilized as part of the 23-24 year. Because of our significant enrollment increase, we have the supplementary enrollment grant, and that's about $166,000. And there were some changes due to the accounting treatment or the timing of revenues. So there was a change in the amortization of capital allocations, which is a decrease of $112,000. So as our assets are being written off and or fully depreciated, the amount of money that's required for fulfilling those amortization expenses drops. The change in revenue due to the estimate accounts is about $470,000. So things such as the preschool fees, which is now expected to be $73,000 greater than budgeted, is a positive thing. Students and children are using our preschools more. Our school generated funds trending is up about $390,000 over what was expected. So that's another positive aspect. And we've collected $18,000 within the international education program based on excursions. So that stays within the international education side. On the expenditure side, or the outflow of funds, some of the large changes are with the ATA negotiated grant increases. We have the 0.5% increase, which was about $66,000. The 1.25% increase of about $166,000, as well as a $33,000 increase to benefits. Those amounts are offset from what we talked about within the revenue side, where there was monies allocated to us for funding the negotiated settlement. We had an increase in certificated hiring of 1.6 FTE, and this was discussed within the first quarter as well. So that translates to about $146,000 plus $20,000 worth of benefits. And that's a 1 FTE teacher at St. Patrick's School, as well as a 0.6 FTE adjustment through a variety of schools. International education, there was an increase of expenditures based on excursions, supplies, activities of about $70,000. SGF expenses are higher than budgeted at $196,000, but just like we talked about within the revenue side, there's also higher collections, so it almost offsets. Technology, we've had increases there, and the board did authorize the increase that we asked for within the for the cybersecurity project, and that was about $96,000. Within learning services, there's the allocation increase of $34,000. We are seeing a higher number of casual wages than budgeted for, and we continue to work with the department to ensure we have the funds to get us through the rest of the year. CCT had a small uplift on their contract of $6,000, and that's now fully reflected within the communities coming together budget. PUF has, well, there's a clawback there. There's fewer PUF students than we had budgeted for. So there's a clawback of $82,000 there. And we're working with Terry and her department to determine if there's adjustments that we can make. This has been forecasted in the budget, so it's absorbed, but we do want to watch to make sure if there's any savings that we can achieve. Within plant operations and maintenance, there was a small increase based on snow removal as well as insurance. Insurance went up $11,000 over budget, and snow snow removal was up $3,500 just due to the number of times we had to remove snow from the parking lots. They also had the federal Safe Air Grant expenditures of $50,000, but you will remember we received a grant from the government for that. The work wasn't completed by September 1st, so those expenses form part of the 22-23, the 22-23 year. I'm getting mixed up. I'm working on next year's budget and this year's budget numbers, so it's starting to bleed together. Within transportation, we had an increase of $41,000, and that was outlined within the first quarter. And again, that was for the additional bus route. We were over capacity on one of our buses and needed to split that. And then within external services, our out-of-school care program is trending about $115,000 higher than what we had expected within the spring budget. This is within the SGF accounts. So the schools collect the funds and then pay it out as wages and benefits. And then the information on the administration, that's outlined on page 17, the details. There's been no substantive change from the first quarter in terms of what we had talked about. So that's remaining almost identical. Within the net assets, we're seeing some movement there. We transferred $100,000 from the restricted reserve to the investment in capital assets for the photocopier replacement. The final details, and that'll be coming up later today, will determine what the final transfer will be for the end of the year. And there was 3 transfers from net assets to the schools from their restricted reserves. So St. Mary's had a $37,000 approval, Mother Teresa $8,000, and St. Michael's almost $4,000. So those are reflected within the net assets. The net asset schedule is on page 10. So I will pause there, and if there's any questions, I can answer them.
Any questions? Mr. Leahy?
Sorry, I'm trying to get down to the page number. 17, page 17. I'm seeing under contracted services. Okay. Where it says for the superintendent,
Yes.
$2,000 was the projection, and now it's $10,000. What happened there?
So it's at the budget was set at 10, and it is now 2. And what we did was transfer $8,000 from that line to the line above for evaluations. So there was no money earmarked for evaluations.
Okay.
So it's just a in budget transfer.
And we had hired a contractor to do some evaluation work, correct? Okay, that's good, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a question, Greg, I don't know what page is on, but it was under revenues, I think,
Okay.
having to do with transportation.
Yes.
We had received 40-some thousand.
Correct.
Is that for the to do with the fuel surcharge?
That's exactly what it's for. So with the fuel surcharge, just let me have the second one. Based on the average monthly provincial diesel price of $1.25 per liter. So whenever that is exceeded, then monies are available to us based on 2.5 kilometers per liter. So Alberta Ed uses that money, punches it through, and then provides an amount. So right now we've received $40,000 for that.
So the net cost of our fuel is $1.25, you said?
That's the base threshold, so whenever it goes above, then monies are.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. King.
Okay, Chair, through you to the Secretary Treasurer. Greg, is there on this quarterly report, a pressure point that was unexpected that is disturbing or upsetting that we didn't anticipate?
The short answer is no. The one area that probably needs a little more attention is within the PUP program. And the only reason why that's an issue is the number of students we had expected, or at least were funded for, didn't materialize. So about $82,000 is being clawed back from that. So we're working with Terry to determine if there's any expenditures that don't need to be incurred for the rest of the year, mainly because those students didn't materialize. We had this issue in a previous year, and it becomes difficult because those staff are baked into the school, so it's hard to extract those FTEs once we're already in April as well. So it's difficult. But we also feel once we move to this new model that Hugh is developing, we're going to have a different way of managing those amounts.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments? Delaney, was that a big scratch or?
Just a scratch.
You didn't buy anything?
So if I may, the recommended motion, as I talked about, is be it resolved that the Board of Trustees for the Medicine Hat Catholic Board of Education approve the acceptance of the 2022-23 second quarter financial update as presented.
Mr.
Madam
Mascout?
Chair, I'll make that motion.
Okay, any discussion, questions? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, staffing update. Mr. Hellman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as the board knows, we had a competition for the principal of St. Mary's School, and Mr. Brad Van Moor, who has been hired. And we had a second competition then for the vice principalship, and Colin Desnoyers has been hired as the vice principal there. Since we've hired Mr. Van Moor, we've actually been able to get Mrs. Snortland to do the choral work over there, because to give Brad some more time in the office, we have Mrs. Snortland doing some work, which is great. She's just loving it, and she's great over there. So that's a couple of very positive things over there. So as I discussed earlier, I've had lots of discussions, and we'll have more discussion with Mr. Lair about the new learning services model. So in many cases, staff and schools will take on facilitated means and backfill hiring will need to take place. And for the most part, the dollars spent for this will come from the change in the learning services model. So some pressure points for September that Nick and I are looking at will be at McCoy. We're looking for some English language arts instruction there, a band teacher, and potentially some religion there. Nick and I and Paul were just at the University of Lethbridge, the hiring fair last Friday. And we did a lot of fishing in there. It's quite an interesting. We really enjoy talking to the new teachers. We found some really good candidates. One English language arts person with some drama background, some fine arts background that we're going to interview. I have prior. We've got two candidates from University of Lethbridge that we're interested in for some music. Because not only we have the band, but we also have an elementary music teacher that's retiring also. So we're looking for some music folks. So we have been talking to some music specialists. Now we're playing with how we want to staff the North, because we have some need for K-6 music, and we have some need at McCoy for their music program. So it's not that we're there yet, but we're looking at a different way to staff those needs with a music teacher, not someone that has a little bit of music in their background and can maybe get us through a year. We're looking at some different ideas So yeah, so we're working on that, and we have some good leads there. This time, based on the model proposed by Mr. Lair, I see our staffing staying very much close to what we have now, with maybe a slight increase. That will of course depend on our numbers coming in as projected. And we talked about pressure points. Mr. Kinch, 9 maternity positions we have to fill for September. So, and we have 1 leave of absence to fill for September. So we'll be looking at hiring, definitely looking at hiring for September. Some of those maternities are filled now, of course, and the candidate that's in those positions would have a great chance of continuing into September, although not necessarily so, because we will repost those. So I'm really quite excited about staffing for next year, in that there's going to be opportunity in our division. There are lots of new staff. We also have a number of staff. I won't be able to give you the exact number off the top of my head, but a number of probationary teachers we are going to continue with and give them continuous contracts for next year. So we're quite excited in terms of staffing. Any questions?
Did you say 9 maternity leaves?
9 maternity leaves, which is very high. I haven't had 9 in my time frame.
That's exciting news.
Yeah, very exciting news.
And it also has implications for our upcoming budget, right? Wow.
So Mr. Gale and I have our hands full in the short term here, but it's exciting.
Maybe it's time for me to make a motion for us to, you've heard me say before, one of my dreams is to have our own daycare in Medicine Hat Cabinet. So it's just a little perk for our staff.
Nick, you want to add anything? While you're actually here?
Not right now, Jack.
Okay, any questions of Mr. Howland? Okay, thanks, Chuck. You're up next.
Okay, we analyzed the diploma exam results, and the report is in there. And so when I go through them, I find it in some areas we're just a tiny bit above provincial average, in some areas we're just a little bit below provincial average. So generally speaking, I see that our numbers are quite good. There's lots of high 90s and 100% in terms of acceptable standards. Any questions? Oh, sorry. Just as usual, McCoy has this information, and their teachers look at it and go back to the exam and go back and look at where they can make changes in their instructions to improve this. That's just kind of a constant what McCoy does.
Go ahead, Mr. Lee.
I was gonna ask Mr. Hellman about achievement test, diploma exam, and later in the year, diploma achievement test analysis. Does that analysis, hard copies of which get shared with you?
So all the schools do their analysis. They will share them with me, and I'll do my own analysis also. One of the things we like to look at is the difference between diploma exam actual test marks and the final mark, because we want to see those marks being as close as we can, right? In terms of elementary schools, the different teams get together and they look at strengths, as in your day, strengths and weaknesses, and you get all that information.
The government used to provide, there used to be a column that showed you what the difference was between the school mark and the
Yeah, we
test
get that
mark.
information.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on exams? Exam results? Okay, thank you, Mr.
Madam
Howland.
Chair,
Oh, sorry.
I have a question. Looking at the sciences, we seem to be, if I'm reading that correctly, we're below the provincial average in physics, biology, and chemistry. Can you give me an explanation? Is that because we have so few students that a 1 or 2 student difference makes the graph look this way, or what are your
Exactly.
thoughts on that?
And I did some of the math on that too earlier. But for example, physics 30 there, all of our kids made acceptable, 40% made excellence, but in the province, 53% made excellence. Right, but no, the 97% being acceptable there. 20, it's out of 28 students, I mean, that's, what's that, 10, 13%? 28 students is only 2 or 3 kids that make up that difference. Biology theory, 95.5 to 96.8, that's one student probably. To get to where the province is probably one more student that we pass that test. And chem theory, same kind of a thing. Acceptable level, this is kind of a Renaissance Catholic thing, we're always higher in acceptable, and just at times, just a tiny bit lower in the standard of excellence. And that's something we've been working on for a long, long time. But again, chemistry theory, all of our students got the standard, 26% versus 49% made the excellence. So that's a difference of 3 or 4 students probably that didn't score the 80%. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So that is definitely something to look at, because that's always something we want our students to be accepted at age.
Well, I'm glad for the explanation. When you look simply at the graph, it doesn't look good. But being that we're such a small division, that a couple of students can make that kind of a difference.
And also that a number that isn't in these results is how many kids actually wrote that exam. And all of our kids write the exams. And that's an important statistic that isn't included in there, is that our kids all write.
Especially important when we talk about PETs.
Yes.
We get 6s and 9s. We have a high number of our students writing those as versus the province. We'll see that in fall. Okay.
Any other comments or questions?
Just as a finishing comment, I'm glad to see that in all of those areas, not all, but in most of the areas, we have 100% of our students meeting the acceptable standard. And I'm more concerned about that than I am with 2 students not getting to the honor side of that and finishing a percent or 2 or 3 below the provincial average. I'm more concerned about meeting the acceptable standard.
Okay. And the next one is ERIP. Mr. Feldman, that's you as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as I've written there, our collective agreement during this board meeting looks at ERIP applications, and we received 2, as you can see. One employee is eligible for $30,000 based on his age. One employee is eligible for $30,000 based on the age. So if, I assume the board's going to have a discussion about this. If the board decides to grant the RIPS, then there'll be a motion. And the motion's written there. If the board decides not to, then it's kind of a moot point. We don't have any motion in that case. So I'm open to questions, and I'm interested to witness the board discussion on this one.
Just a point of order. So we need to make the motion to have the discussion. Is that correct? Yeah. So we will need to make the motion.
Okay.
So I'll make the motion on the first one.
Okay. So that's employee 10362. All in favor?
Can we have
No
some discussion, Chair?
Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Just as a point of interest, I guess, have these, or has this individual taken a program where they could essentially retire in January? No.
Neither have.
Neither have. Okay. So also, Chair, so this individual, 10362, would be 54 or younger, is that correct?
55.
55?
That's 54 or younger is 35,000.
Yes, that's right.
Go ahead.
I just want to confirm, Madam Chair, that from my understanding and recollection of the budget, we have not allocated in the budget any money for ERIPS. Is that Correct.
That's correct.
Any other comments? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's well known, around this table anyway, that I don't support ERIPS. I have in the past, but over the course of my time on the board, coming to a greater understanding of education and how it works and how it's funded. And I no longer support them. It's important for the public to know that we don't know who the retirees are. Although it's a small division, some people may know who they are, but generally we don't, well, at least I don't. And not supporting ERIPS in a small community is not easy. I've had to work with people in ministry, in parish life, that have applied, and I didn't support them. And it's not an easy thing for me not to support ERIPS. I understand that we're obligated to look at each ERIP individually and weigh them on their own merits. And I do recognize that they are, I believe ERIPS are beneficial in some sectors, but not in education. And I'll use some of the arguments I made last year, because I mean, they're good. We're a high performing division. And we have, and I believe that correlates directly to our teaching, our staff, the experience of our staff. We have our grid, how we give salaries according to the 10-year grid. I think we're one of the highest grids in the province. So I think there's a good correlation between teacher experience and results. And it just seems inconceivable to me that in education that we're encouraging people at the prime of their career to retire. And the amount of investment that we put in each individual, like professional development over the course of their career, and we're saying, here's some money, go away. And so I don't see how that benefits students. Like, we are employers, but our number one goal is to be educators. And as a result of that, we are employers. And so we have responsibility to our employees, safe work environment, faith-filled environment in regards to Catholic education, just wage, but not ERIPS. That's just not part of our obligation. And so, yeah, I just, for those points and probably others, I just won't be supporting either application.
Any other comments? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand the reasons that that Deacon Robert is outlining, but in addition to being a board and that's managing our division and educating our students, we also are money managers, and we have to look at the issue from a financial point of view. Giving an ERIP to a 55-year-old individual will save us money in the long run. So you have to ask yourself the question, I guess, is it more important to manage the money, or is it more important to keep the teachers longer? And I have difficulty, in my mind, reconciling which of those bears more weight. These individuals will retire with or without an ERIP. Letting you know about my uncertainty about which way I'm going to vote. I think I will support Deacon Robert and not support the ERIP.
Mr. Hill?
I was just gonna, Mr. Mastel, in my experience, most retired, whether they get the ERIP or not. But we have had instances in the past where someone didn't get an ERIP and said, well, then I'm staying. So that's why I be very clear.
Mr. Leahy?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Since I've become a trustee, I've done a 180 on ERIPS. I don't support them anymore. I won't be supporting these. I jump back. I hope through negotiations, Madam Chair, we're able to reach an agreement that provides us a solution, much like through your leadership, Madam Chair, we came to a go forward with salary increases here in the office, where it doesn't come here. It's in the collective agreement. So I hope it's settled that way. Right. Where I would have trouble is Mr. Mastel is correct. The fact is that if you hire a very young teacher and replacing an experienced one, you save money. Doesn't always work that way, and I don't like to hamstring administration by saying you will. But that's where I have some trouble, especially with 54-year-olds. And then I also have trouble, Madam Chair, because of a comment you made last year, where you mentioned the women who lose years because of maternity leave. And that had an impact on me. Nonetheless, I won't be supporting this application and the other one.
Go ahead.
I'd like to add, I remember last year when we had this discussion, I think it was David that mentioned something, how to word it. It had something to do with how we value our teachers and how do we show our appreciation. Remember those comments? How do we show our appreciation to our staff? And an ERIP is, I guess, that's one way of saying, yeah, we value, your contribution to Medicine Hat Catholic. But, and maybe that's something, we do have awards or incentive, what do we call that?
Employee recognition.
Employee recognition, things like that. And I think it's important that, at least from my perspective, my not supporting a ERIP has nothing to do with the value, how much I value our teachers and those who are retiring, because I truly do. It's just not, the philosophy of an ERIP in education is just beyond my comprehension. There is an alternative that we offer in our division. If you retire early, you can get a temporary contract and collect your pension at the same time. And so those are offered, and I believe that's the route that teachers, I would hope teachers would take in the future.
Anything else? Mr. Kinch? Did you have anything to add?
Yes, Chair, thank you. So I look at it and I have no idea whether either of the two people applying for ERIP have asked or even considered going part-time and retiring at the end of January or not. Again, that's their choice. I don't know if that was presented to them, and they may have decided just later that they came to an understanding with themselves that it's time to retire. The point of the ERIP when it was brought in was to encourage older staff to retire, because I think at the time our district was feeling somewhat hamstrung, for lack of a better expression, because it was an older staff and they were fine. It would just free up money. And the funding of each of these is always made up in the differential between a retiring teacher's wage at the top of the scale and the expectation that quite likely there would be a teacher hired somewhere in the district at a beginning level. Now, whether it's 55 or 55 and older, the values change. I know previously the board had negotiated with the teachers to say, can we put in a top end to this? Because it used to be unlimited. You could teach till 75 and then apply. And at the time, it was almost rubber stamped, for lack of a better expression. But now it's been negotiated that there's an age limit. I believe the top end is 61. And so having done that and negotiated that, there was kind of an expectation that ERIP would continue. It's the choice of the board, it's the choice of each trustee to look at and be a steward financially. When I look at it and I see that the differential in hiring a new teacher, a new graduating teacher, with a retiring older teacher, it doesn't cause any hardship on the district, other than we lose the experience of that teacher. The question is, and I think Mr. Hellman has presented this, is that most of the time, these teachers will still retire anyway. And I remember talking with superintendents saying, if you're applying for ERIP, you're probably in a good financial position where you can retire. But we have this clause and teachers are allowed to apply for it. Because these teachers, neither of them is going to get half a year of pension during the year and their wage. For that reason, I look at the clause and just, for my peace of mind, I will support their applications.
And I will too. I have been one that has supported ERIP all along. And I will, because it's in the contract and I think we can apply for it. I too, like David said, wish this could be settled so that this is the way it is, but this is not the way it is right now, and I will support it. So I guess we'll vote on that first one, 10362. Robert, you got that forward, right? Okay, I will call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? Okay, 3-2, it is not granted.
Does anybody want that vote recorded?
I have been recording those.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just want
It just as kind of a practice, if that's okay.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, that's okay.
We're supposed to have.
We're supposed to have it.
Okay.
It's supposed to be a request for a record. But it can be recorded. In my opinion.
Okay, so we need the motion for the second one.
I'll make it.
Dick?
Madam Chair, I will move that employee 10873 be granted the $20,000 year.
Okay, discussion. No discussion, all in favor? True. And mine can be recorded. And all opposed? 3-2, it is not granted. All right. So strategic priority, Dr. Zwichny is not here, so we'll just leave that one. Or do you have something for that, Mr. Homer?
Just because it's a standard report, that's the same one that
Okay.
I always presents.
An update on the consolidation project, if you need anything on that?
Not that I'm aware of, other than at the writing of this, we did not receive any of that money that we were expecting, so to the best of my knowledge, it's still not there.
Okay, so it's just kind of like it was with our discussion meeting.
Correct.
We're kind of at the same spot. Perfect.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was, just to repeat a point, I'm sorry, I don't know if we made it in our recent discussion meeting or our last meeting or formal meetings, is I'd like to encourage administration. Just because we haven't received that letter from the minister doesn't mean we can't start. And I know Dr. Zarichny has started to do some of this stuff, you know, on booking the tours, you know, setting meetings with the city to discuss whatever and so on. But there are
Even
things,
fundraising.
right, there are things we need to do and we don't need to wait for that letter to arrive. We just know it and ask that of them. Thank you.
Go ahead, and then.
Thanks, Madam Chair, to Greg. What information do we have about using the money from the sale of St. Louis? Both the Alberta Ed's portion and our portion, is that money available to us to augment our fundraising efforts here? And a second question, looking farther down the road, what are the implications and the restrictions, if any, about the sale of St. Michael's and the sale of St. Mary's?
So with regards to the proceeds from the disposition of the former St. Louis school, as you've indicated, both the Alberta Ed portion and the Medicine Hat Catholic portion are in our capital reserve. We previously applied to the minister, which we would need to do, to use those funds for a specified project dealing with the theater. Given, and we received approval. Given that this is a slightly different project, I would recommend we reapply for approval. I wouldn't expect there would be any pushback from the minister on this, but those funds are available. We just need to go through the appropriate process.
And that's 500,000.
Just normal. With regards to the disposition of St. Mary's School as well as St. Michael's School, we would have to go through the disposition of property regulation. It's a fairly straightforward process where we would apply to get rid of the schools. The ministry, in conjunction with other government departments, would determine if there's a need within government or other appropriate organization for those facilities. And then failing that, there would be the opportunity to go through the sale of those. There are certain restrictions we will have to work with the city, particularly for the St. Michael's School, based on the school land is designated school reserve. So we'll have to work with the city on that, but I don't anticipate any challenge.
I guess, Greg, the point of my question was, when we get to the sale portion, is there going to be a division of assets between Alberta Ed and us, as there was with St. Louis, or does either one of those entities own the entire block?
So that's a good question. My understanding, and I haven't confirmed this, but my understanding is compared to St. Louis, the former St. Louis School, which was built using predominantly Catholic funds, but it was modernized at later times using government funds. That's why there was those splits. With regards to St. Mary's and St. Michael's, I would anticipate that we would find 100% of the construction was funded using government of Alberta funds. So I wouldn't expect that there would be a Medicine Hat Catholic portion. Typically, the government would allow us to retain those funds within the capital reserve and apply to the minister at an appropriate time to use those funds on a specified approved project.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, yeah, no, as we proceed and go forward, I hope that we're going to extend ourselves and consult and engage stakeholders to a large degree. As we've been allotted some monies now, we can actually make some projections of what this consolidation project might look like. Also, I'm hoping that in the future, relatively short time, that at some point we will be making a vote on proceeding with this and effectively closing 3 schools and moving 1 academy at some point, I would hope perhaps in the fall.
Dwayne was talking about we need to find out if we need to close schools, right?
So as he talked about in the board discussion meeting, because we're going to keep the school codes intact, the schools would not have to be closed under our policies. If we were to just say, no, this is 1 school, then we would have to go through the school closure process. That doesn't absolve us of having to consult and deal with the public, but from a procedural point of view, there isn't that.
Madam Chair, but it also doesn't preclude us from taking a vote on that. And I think because this will be extremely impactful to our district, I think it would be prudent for us to vote.
Go
Okay,
ahead,
you go
Mr.
ahead.
McPherson has a clarifying comment.
I think that discussion was correct. I would remind the trustees, though, as part of the capital plan, this was voted on in terms of the process.
And Alberta Infrastructure takes over too, don't they? So there's, like, it's kind of all up in the air right now.
There's a bit of discussion, there's a bit of discussion around exactly how that project will unfold. We expect once we receive the letter from the minister, which is due
Yes,
any minute, then we'll have a kickoff meeting with Alberta Infrastructure, and the pathways will become clearer. Sorry to.
go ahead, David.
I would like to encourage administration to seek a legal opinion about where the approval status of this project stands. So I hear Mr. Kinch saying, we should have a vote whether we're going to do this or not. I heard Mr. McPherson saying, well, we may have already done that with the approval of the capital plan. I don't know.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested in hearing that legal opinion. I also don't mind having a vote either, but I want to hear the legal side of it first.
And I think when those paths become clearer, it's going to be easier to do that.
Right.
Go ahead.
I will say, and I don't know if doctors originally said this part, I wouldn't mind having a legal opinion about this whole transfer of the school code issue as well. Why? Because even though it can be messy, and even though it can be difficult, if it's not a clear legal opinion on that saying, yes, you can do that, I think at this point, I would still rather go through the school closure process, or I would need to be very comfortable that we are going to have a robust community engagement on this process. Okay, because I wouldn't want the situation where X number of parents are saying, okay, we're going to have a chance to express our concerns, and then the answer back is, well, no, we're not going to discuss this. We're just going to transfer the school codes, and that's that. No, if that's legal, fine, but I still would like to have an assurance, and I'm not expecting it to be put in front of us right now, but in fairly short order, a robust community engagement on this.
Mr. Mastoff?
Well, to trustee Leahy, I'm not sure, I share your concern, but I'm not sure that we need to have a legal opinion. I think the final authority, from my understanding, would rest with the minister. We have to follow the act. And the minister certainly would be familiar with what steps we'd have to take. I don't know that a legal opinion is going to give us a leg up and satisfy what you want to know.
Well, an opinion from somebody then in the department or a lawyer saying, let me put it this way, I would much rather go through the school closure process and know that that's a regulation and that's been put through the department and this is how we need to do that, versus saying, listen, without us really talking to even though we heard from the superintendent that he had talked to somebody in Alberta Education, that was a conversation. I need to see it in black and white that says, yes, under this regulation or this authority, you can just transfer a school code. I need to see that.
Well, I think that's a fair comment, but I don't know that a legal opinion is where we need to go. I think that should come directly from the minister at some point.
And I'm comfortable with that just as long as we've got a good documentation that this is in fact the way we go.
Okay, Mr. Kent.
Madam Chair, just very quickly, I agree with Mr. Leahy. I think, yes, we need something that says we can proceed, but I would also be more comfortable with the school closure process because then it's all cut and dry. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? All right, we'll move on to the establishment of a separate school district. Mr. McPherson.
Thank you. So this is a follow-up to the discussion we've had before where there were electors who are outside of our boundary wanting to set up a school district and transition that into Medicine Hat County.
That's at 4x4.
A 4x4 process. Absolutely. We have been informed by those individuals that they are not interested in pursuing the establishment at this time. So this issue is now closed. With the with the changes to the transportation funding, there's now an opportunity to transport those students in question and actually receive funding for them. So there's an application process that's being developed. We expect to receive that at the end of the month. The electors, unfortunately, would still not be eligible to vote or run as Catholic school trustees or to provide their property tax to Catholic Ed and Education. However, their students would be at least potentially transported.
And we would receive money for this.
And we would receive money. Well, we already received the base instruction grant for the students. If they are attending, we would just be able to receive the transportation funding, so we could then provide the parent with money in lieu of school busing or potentially provide school busing.
And this is down Folsom Road, right? Or is it?
Oh my goodness, you're asking me that.
It's past Bowl, isn't it?
Yes, it's in that whole area, so
Okay.
kind of between Redcliffe and Southfield. And there is an opportunity for expanding into Suffield as well. There was a parent who was interested in that 4x4 process.
Okay. David.
And just because I grew up out there, like in Ralston, I'd be interested in, if there's Catholic personnel with Canadian Forces or British Forces who would be interested. There's an elementary, junior high school there, but come high school, if they'd be interested in having the option to bring their kids in to go to a Catholic high school.
There is, and but there's also interest on the French side. So we've been in contact with officials there, and so we're waiting for confirmation of the application process, and that might open up opportunities to expand, which would be beneficial because the more students we have, it becomes cost effective to provide a bus.
And I'll just add, I appreciate I brought something to Mr. McPherson's attention, on a local website that only listed, a lot of these people who come into Alberta aren't aware that that Catholic education in this province, you don't need to pay tuition. And I know Greg has addressed some of those concerns, and that's excellent. And I think if we are to let this information be widely circulated, we may have X number of students join us. And the more Catholic kids coming to our system, the better off we are.
Back in the day, this is sort of, it's a subject, but the Canadian Forces used to bring a bus to town.
Yes.
And kids used to go to McCoy when I went to McCoy, and they got off the Canadian Forces bus.
Yeah, well, I was one of those kids.
But you were at the other school.
I was at Crescent Heights.
Yeah,
You had your
but yeah.
choice. It was a milk run. Crescent Heights, McCoy, Hat High.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the day, Hat High, Crescent Heights. And then a couple of years, well, I don't know how many years after we left, that changed. And the only choice they had was Prairie Rose, was
Okay.
Eagle Butte.
I just saw that, that big bus used to come.
We did have that discussion, but that option apparently is no longer available to basic methods.
Okay. All right, any more discussion on that? Mr. McPherson, budget information for 23-24.
Thank you. So this is a summary of what was presented to the trustees in the board discussion meeting. We're in full swing with the preliminary budget planning. In terms of the funding that we've received, we're very excited with the increase of $1.7 million year over year. Based on the funding and our enrollment projections, there could be a small clawback of 138,000. So it'll be a little less than $1.7 million we're anticipating. Within the amounts that we are anticipating on receiving, almost $50,000 of that is earmarked very specifically for transportation funding. In fact, that's envelope money. So we'll have a better sense of how that money is going to be dispersed. In conjunction with that increase for transportation funding, there's an obligation to transport students at lower distances than we currently are. The funding historically has been based on 2.4 kilometers residents from their designated school. We've been transporting elementary students at 1.2 kilometers. In terms of the new standards, middle school to high school students would be transported based on 2 kilometers, and elementary students based on 1 kilometer. So the incremental cost to us won't be as much because we're already transporting those elementary kids at 1.2. So we are working with our contracted transportation provider to come up with a route, and then based on that, we can scale the cost of what those are, and that ideally will be part of the May budget. We've received additional money, $178,000 for classroom complexity, and we're receiving $540,000 for the teacher contract settlements. So when you take that off of the funding that we're receiving, that leaves just under $400,000 for available in incremental funding, which is a very positive thing. However, when we look at the amount of monies that are going into the services and supports funding, which is a term used for Hughes area, that amount substantially is earmarked for Hughes budget. So the rest of the budget is somewhat the same, which isn't a bad thing at all. We should be able to proceed and move forward with our level of funding. But it is very good news for Hughes project.
More money for you.
More money for Hughes.
Yes,
Go
I
ahead.
think earlier this evening, he said something, he's never had as much money. Not that I'm gonna constantly remind him.
Most of that is not earmarked, so as the budget process unfolds and needs are known, we'll be able to better assess where that money should reside at the end of the day.
David,
A question for Mr. McPherson. I noted in your presentation about the second quarter financial update, you mentioned something about a supplemental growth grant.
Yes.
With the projected numbers we're seeing for next year, I believe it's an increase of 44 students.
Year over year, yes. Yeah, that's correct.
Will that qualify for the 2% or the 5%?
We will probably get in at the 2%, but it's the incremental amount between 2 and 5. So the amount of the supplemental growth is going to be low. It won't be the same amount that we were getting.
So it's not a windfall.
Not a windfall, but still those 44 extra students with their base funding is
Yes,
positive.
yeah, that was being semi-facetious.
is that 44, is that projected or is that real numbers?
So right now, everything's a projection. There are
Yeah.
hard enrollment numbers, but like I like to keep reminding Mr. Hellman, the only number that matters is the September 30th.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, good. Any other questions for Mr. McPherson? And you got another one here, financial reporting.
Oh, thank you. So each year, the government provides the financial reporting profile, and that report is attached. And it examines several metrics over a 5-year period and compares our results to all school boards as well as boards of a similar size. So when you look at the report at the end of the 21-22 year, with regards to our accumulated surplus from all operations to our total expenses, we were at 5.05%, which is up from 2021 which was at 4.07%. So what does that mean? Well, it means the amount of money that we have within our accumulated surplus has increased compared to what our total expenditures were. So those two numbers don't really provide out anything for us until you start to compare that to what other boards are doing. So when you look at the average of all other jurisdictions, they were at 5.01%. So we are very, very close to the average. But when you compare us to the average of the similar sized jurisdictions, they're at 7.65%. So their accumulated surplus is higher than their ratio to total expenses compared to us. So it does give a measure that the amount of money that we have in our reserve is comparable to what the ratio is in the average of all the other boards. So that's a good measure to have. The second area looks at the accumulated surplus from operations as a dollar amount by student. So when you take our total ASO divided by the total number of students, we're at $683 per student. And when you compare that to the average of all the jurisdictions, that's at $629. So again, a very close measure. When you compare us to jurisdictions of a similar size, they are at $1,235 per student. So almost double of what we're at. The days of operation, and sometimes we talk about that, you know, we want to have 5 days of operation or whatever. Ours right now is at 12.62. The average of all jurisdictions is at 12.52. So again, a very tight measure, but the similar sized jurisdictions are sitting at 19.14. So we're right on average within the province, but a little lower than what our comparable size school boards are. The next area looks at capital reserves, and that's displayed as a dollar amount per student. Now, as a side note, our capital reserves have increased drastically, and that is because of the proceeds from the sale of the former St. Louis school. So our per student number is $230 per student. The provincial average is 420, so we're quite a bit lower than even on the provincial average. And like-sized school jurisdictions are at $498 per student, so we're quite a bit lower. There's a variety of factors that could drive that. So as a measure, we have to remember the capital reserves are used for replacing capital assets. So if a school board is running their own transportation system, each year they're putting a little money aside in that capital reserve to replace the buses when they reach end of life. We don't run that, so we don't have the need to reserve those funds. So it's the capital reserve measure isn't, it's neither good nor bad. It's just a measure that our capital reserve is lower, and there could be very valid reasons for that. The liquidity area is colored in salmon, and what that does is measures our financial assets to our liabilities. So a ratio of 1 means the total of our assets covers the total of our liabilities. If you have lower than 1, it means your debt is higher than how much money you have on hand. So right now we're sitting at 1.30, which is very good, and the provincial average is 1.63. So we're a little below the provincial average, but we're still in a very healthy position. Similar sized jurisdictions are sitting at 2.08, so which would imply they probably have lots more cash on hand than we do. The green area is looking at financial assets per student. We have $764 per student. The provincial average is $913. So again, we're a little lower. And then similar sized jurisdictions are at 2,146. So a significant amount more financial assets on hand, probably cash. So. And then the last major area is looking at the capital assets, reflecting the comparing it to the existing net book value. So for our buildings, when you look at those measures, so the price of the building compared to what the net book value is, we're sitting at 65%. The provincial average is at 59.7. So the higher number can reflect a variety of things, whether it's newer buildings, whether there's been modernizations of those buildings, whether school boards are capitalizing the IMR costs that are being put in to maintain those buildings. Generally, the higher the percentage, the better. So in this measure, we are doing very well compared to the provincial average. On the equipment side, we're at 13.47 compared to 23.51% provincially. So that measures the age of the equipment within the division. So most of our investment in capital assets is with the IT equipment and vehicles. Our vehicles are fully depreciated. In fact, we're looking at replacing them very soon. And historically, we've had long use of IT equipment. For example, those smart boards were 12 years old. We've replaced them. So next year, we expect to see our percentage bump up. And then we've outlined who the similar sized jurisdictions are. There's 12 of them. So.
Okay, any comments or questions of Greg? Okay, well, thank you, Greg, for all your reports there. Communications, Tiana?
Thank you. My report's attached, and I'm happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Anybody have any questions of Tiana? Go ahead.
Just a comment, I thought it was very impressive, the things I saw on social media about Stations of the Cross, and I'm sorry, I forget the dramatic technique they use when they're behind the curtain. Shadow, yeah, that's always, first time I saw it was with Mr. Blackmere, and it's always a very powerful thing, and the kids really get into it.
Thank you for getting all of our grace announcements out.
Yeah, of course.
That's great. That video of Mrs. Renicus too was just crazy good. That got a lot of hits, like a lot. So anyway, thank you, Tiana. All right, action and discussion items, Braiding Together Conference. Dr. Zarichny, do you know anything about that, Mr. Howard?
So I'm happy to speak to that. So Tiana and Dwayne and I and Rod Willier, our Indigenous sport teacher, went last year, and it was an excellent conference. So Dwayne and I were talking about the opportunity of offering that as an opportunity to our principals in the fall. So registration is not open, so I'm not sure of the costs yet, but it's a very valuable conference. So we are interested in asking if some of the monies earmarked for religious education from international ed could be put toward attendance for this conference.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I don't really see why you would even need to ask the board about that. Like, to me, it's a budgeting thing, like Mr. McPherson, Financial Services will generate a budget for what international education is going to generate. Half of the proceeds are going to go to religious, a quarter of the proceeds will go to, half of the proceeds stay with religious education, I'm sorry, international education. A quarter goes to religious ed, and the rest is to be determined. And so part of me says it's X number of dollars is going to be allocated to your department, and then it's just a decision between yourself and Mr. McPherson as to how that money gets expended. I don't think, anyway, that's the way I see it.
Yeah.
This is for next year.
Yes, in October.
Is that correct? Yeah.
So away you go.
Sounds great.
Yeah, see ya.
I think it's important though that we get a breakdown of how the money is being spent.
Yes. This is on what? Truth and Reconciliation?
It's very powerful to have the Indigenous people representing, and then the bishops and archbishops all together. So we just kind of scratched the surface last year. Now I think we're going to get to what are we going to do? How are we going to walk together?
Nice. Very good. Okay, any comments, questions? No motions needed. All right, 11.2, photocopier and printer request for proposal. McPherson.
So we've had a fairly in-depth discussion with this during the board discussion meeting. As a reminder, the fleet of photocopiers have been around for 5 years, which was the expected lifespan. And they're starting to fail, and we're seeing increased numbers of maintenance requests. So we've put out an RFP, or a request for proposal. 5 proponents submitted, and then 1 subsequently withdrew. A selection committee was struck, and it had cross-representation from schools and central office. The proponents provided in-person presentations of their photocopiers, and machines were installed at selected schools for a 2-week trial. So the machines were run through their paces really well, and that helped inform the selection committee's decision. The scoring is outlined on the second page of my my report. And then based on that scoring, Konica Minolta was the successful proponent as the scoring was higher than all of the others. The pricing looked at the capital cost as well as the 5-year operating costs, so pretty much total life cycle costing of the machines. We also, Konica Minolta has a vendor located in Medicine Hat for dealing with all the maintenance and servicing requirements, which will help schools ensure that the photocopiers are down, if they are down for not a very long time. We also called references, and there were no issues identified from those vendors. Within the costing, the capital costing for the purchase is $361,282. I have identified what the operating costs on a per page amount are on page 3 of my report. And as you can see, compared to our current provider, Konica Minolta is offering a lower cost per page than other vendors were, which again helps keep our costs down. So the purchase of these machines will come from the restricted reserve net assets. We have a line item called future replacement of capital assets, which has $303,000 in it. And then the residual will come from the unrestricted net assets of $57,000. The funds will be transferred to investment in capital assets, and then schools and central office will be charged an annual amortization expense to repay the restricted reserve. The best way to think of that amount is that's the lease payment that we're going to charge ourselves to replenish that reserve. And then the operating costs will be charged to the schools and central office based on actual consumption. The existing photocopiers have no material economic value, and under our privacy requirement, the hard drives are removed from the photocopiers and then destroyed, ensuring that there's no privacy impact. The division we discussed at the March 23 discussion meeting that there was an urgency to this to ensure that the replacement of the photocopiers are available. There was concerns that there could be potentially some supply chain issues. So we made the decision at that point to proceed with the contract. However, we do need to get a board motion for the actual purchase. In addition, I'm looking for a motion to transfer those funds from the restricted reserve into the investment and capital assets. So the two motions that I'm asking for is, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees for the Medicine Hat Catholic Board of Education award the photocopier and printer RFP to Konica Minolta in the amount of $361,282 plus GST. And the second motion is, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees for the Medicine Hat Catholic Board of Education authorize the transfer of $303,388 from the restricted reserve future replacement of assets to the investment in capital assets.
Okay, so like Greg said, the paperwork on this has already started from our discussion meeting. We decided to go ahead with the paperwork just so we didn't lose our place in the queue because of supply chain issues that are going on right now throughout the world, actually. But so we have started on this already. So if I can get somebody to do the first motion, and then we'll have discussion. You can, Robert. Be it resolved, the Board of Trustees award this to Konica Minolta. Any discussion on that?
Just a question now. Greg, who provides the equipment now?
Xerox is our current.
Did they bid on the?
They did.
They did.
Any other questions or discussion? Okay, I'll call the question then. All in favor? And the second part, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Medicine Catholic Board of Education authorize the transfer of $303,388 from restricted reserve, future replacement of assets to investment capital. I have someone with that. Mr. Mestel? Any discussion or questions? All in favor? 4 in favor, of those opposed? 1. Okay, that is passed. Okay, amendment of board policy 2. This is the third reading of this, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, recommendation that the Board of Trustees of Medicine Catholic Board of Education have the third and final reading to amend board policy 2, review and approve compensation for all staff during a review of compensation for non-unionized employees. The board will solicit input from the chief superintendent or other sources as needed, and at the board's discretion, ratify memorandum of agreement with bargaining units. Okay, this is the third reading, so Mr. Leahy.
I'd like to move it for third reading, Madam Chair.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. All right, thank you. Committee reports, ATA negotiations, Mr. Mestel.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Having been away for most of the time since the last meeting, I don't think there's anything new to report from what I have seen, and I call on Greg to correct me here if I'm out of line, that the negotiations have pretty much been put off now until sometime in September. Is that?
That's correct. We're just trying to finalize a series of
Finalize
dates
it.
for September.
Thank you.
Okay, QP, Deacon Robert.
Nothing to report.
Teacher Board Advisory, Mr. Kinch.
Madam Chair, I have no report.
Okay. Support staff, Deacon Robert.
Nothing to report.
QP support staff, Mr. Leahy.
Nothing to report.
Student Board Advisory Committee. I have nothing to report. Audit Committee. Mr. McPherson, do we have anything to report?
There's no report.
Division Consolidation Planning, Mr. Dr. Zrich is not here. Do you have anything for that? Alberta School Board Association, Mr. Mestel.
Thanks, Madam Chair. The last meeting we had was on March 15th. I'll preface all of what I'm about to say that a lot of the information that we're getting, by the time we get the information at the zone level, and by the time it comes to report on that, is all old news. It's either come to all trustees from ASBA, or it's come to the board chair. So much of, in fact, almost all of the things that I want to touch on is really old news, and you should have seen it before or heard it before from somewhere. There is a new cohort beginning in September for school board training. That's new. President Maryland commented on the budget, the provincial budget, and highlighted that there were changes to transportation, and there were notices that had gone out to the board chairs on March 15th. March 18th, there was a conference on funding rather, and enrollment. On March 14th, there were new rules for transportation and ongoing advocacy. President Maryland identified that there were 58 new schools and modernizations that have been approved subsequent to the last budget. They were actively recruiting individual students rather for the Minister's Youth Council. And I believe the deadline to that has already passed. They're looking for 40 students ages 14 to 19. The deadline for that was March 24th. Vice President Shalley reported on PDAC meeting that they had on March the 7th. Discussions on new proposals and the discussion at the meeting regarding the pre-election material. Vivian, the CEO, asked the question about boards borrowing money for capital projects due to shortage and aging of schools. It will be raised with the minister. The Zone 6 next meeting on April the 19th is going to have a little more substance to it, being that it's the meeting where the budget is going to be outlined for the ASBA. While we're on the topic of the conference, that conference is in early June. I don't know the date, but I think it's around the 2nd or 3rd of June. This is the conference which historically has taken place in Red Deer. I understand that there are some issues with the facility, and for this year only, I believe, the spring conference for ASBA is being held at the Westin downtown in Calgary. I have attended all of those spring board meetings during the time I was a trustee. I would really encourage you to give some consideration to attending. It's an excellent venue for networking with other trustees to talk about issues. There's a lot of things that go on that aren't at the actual convention floor. There's a lot of other things that happen. I know that some of those sessions can get long and can get boring when you're talking about budget things, or in the fall meeting when you're talking about resolutions. Those things can drag on almost indefinitely. But that's what we've signed on to do. And I would encourage you to give some thought to attending those sessions. Further to ASBA, Edwin Parr event will be held on the 17th of May, and that traditionally is in Tabor. That is going to be the date of the May zone meeting, and following the zone meeting, we move to the, I believe it's the Heritage Inn in Tabor, rather, for the Edwin Parr event. There was some discussion around the table about merit. That is, I forget what it stands for, but it's the training program for bus drivers. Greg, what's the acronym is there?
I believe it's called MELT.
MELT, yeah.
Mandatory Education. That's as far as sorry.
Anyway, bus drivers are included. Now, there was some discussion that boards are training bus drivers, and then they leave and go get jobs elsewhere in the industry. And there was some discussion about that. There were no solutions put forward, but there was a concern that being that the bus driver driving a bus is not that financially rewarded because you're only driving for a couple of hours during the day. And after having that training, you can be off and making considerably more money working full time for a trucking company. And you already had that training. So again, I ask you to give some consideration to attending the spring conference in Calgary and attending the Edwin Parr dinner in Tabor. It's really a big deal for our nominee from here in the district. I know that from having attended previously, that the parents of the nominee are really encouraged by support from the district. I know that the superintendent normally attends. I think, Chuck, you have attended many or most or all. And it's really an important, important deal. This is an ASBA function. It is our nominee from our district. And I would like to see you give some consideration to attending that event also and supporting our Edmund Parr nominee. We did have a winner from our district about 4 years ago, I want to say, maybe 5, 4 years or 5.
That was, none of the names in my, okay.
Teresa Shirk, yes, yes. I know that one of my nieces was a nominee. She was nominated by Grasslands. We don't have her in our district, but she's nominated by Grasslands. And seeing Uncle Dick there supporting our candidate and being able to congratulate my niece at that was quite an important moment for her. And I know that the nominee and the parents are very eager to receive the support from the district. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions? ACSTA, we actually have a meeting next month, but it's the same time. It's the director's meeting and it's in Nisku, I think it is. But it's May 25th and 26th, which is exactly the same as our grad, so I won't be able to attend that. But, and the only other thing I have was that survey, and you guys already gave me an answer on that.
Madam Chair, before you leave that, I want to make the same pitch for representation to the ACSDA as I did for the ASBA with regard to SPICE and blueprints. Heather and I had a conversation just before this meeting started, and I indicated that in my 13 years as a trustee, I have missed only one blueprints, and that was last year, when for some reason I missed the deadline and got timed out. It's an excellent place to connect with, again, with other Catholic trustees and to talk to them about issues and about the things that they're facing. The other thing is that the speakers that we have there are world-class speakers. And I don't say that without any, I say that without any hesitation at all. Speakers like Mike Patan, who is going to be at Blueprints, or at SPICE rather, and David Wells, who has been here in this district, and I've heard speak at Blueprints probably on 3 or 4, maybe 4 occasions, are world-class presenters. They present all over the world. I don't know specifically where Mike calls home, but I know that that David Wells, the author of the book study that we're doing, is in England. He has a particular soft spot for Alberta, and I think that comes from the relationship that he's had with the ACSTA, and in no small measure, Michelle Collette, who has been with the ACSTA for many years and is now back again, but you already know that, and she's able to organize those events and knows those people on a first name basis. She probably has their phone numbers in her speed dial. Other districts support Blueprints and SPICE to a much higher level than we do. They spend board money sending teachers to SPICE. They have a good contingency, and sometimes with some districts, all of their trustees attend, not just 1 or 2. And as I mentioned to Heather earlier, there have been many events where I was the only one representing Medicine Hat Catholic, and you sometimes have to answer the question, where are the rest of your trustees? I said, well, they got the same invitation I did. So again, I ask you to give that some consideration. It is 2.5 days of inspiration, of retreat. There's a huge element there of liturgy, finishing with a mass on the Friday morning. I think it ends on Friday morning, presided by, it could be any one of a number of individuals. We've had Archbishop Smith from Edmonton preside at the mass on some occasions. So again, I'm sorry for taking so long, Madam Chair, but I'd like to extend the invitation to fellow trustees to give some consideration to supporting Blueprints and Horse Place.
When is Blueprints? I forget, I'm registered for it.
I believe it starts on May the 2nd, I think. That would be a Tuesday evening, and it runs until Friday morning is the mass, and it finishes at noon on Friday. I believe is the timeline. Chelsea, can
I'm
you?
pretty sure, I have it in here till the 5th, but I think that might be,
That's the Friday.
Fridays.
oh, it is the 5th, sorry,
Yeah.
sorry, I was looking at my calendar wrong.
No, that's good. I just didn't have it in here.
The event finishes on the 5th
Yes.
at noon, following mass.
Dick and I are going to this. And Dick's driving, right?
I guess. I know the way.
I hate driving. All right. Education Foundation, Mr. Kinch.
Madam Chair, we have several meetings coming up in the near future. First one is going to be Thursday, all leading up to the golf tournament.
And that's on the 9th, right?
Of June, yes. And that's my report.
Okay, thank you. Parent Association, I didn't get the minutes into Chelsea, but we met this month, and we hadn't met the month before, so it's just people sharing what is happening around at their schools and stuff. It's a really interesting meeting. It's kind of neat to hear everything that the schools are doing, all their different fundraising and their different projects and stuff. I'm just really happy about being part of it. TIBA, Mr. Mastel.
Madam Chair, I don't believe there's been a TIBA meeting since we met last. Has there, Greg?
No, I will agree with you.
There hasn't been a meeting. Thank you.
Okay, Spiritual Leadership Scholarship, Mr. Leahy.
No report.
All right, that brings us to the closing prayer, which is St. Louis's prayer. St. Louis School. This is so nice, Heather, that you arranged that we can use their.
Agree?
Yep.
Good job.
A couple of those guys that are in the confirmation class. Okay, that's it. Adjournment.
Thank you.
We are adjourned. At 6:30.